Good morning again. My name is Dharmaraj, and welcome to Sunday service. Nice to see you all. The reading this week from Rays of the One Light, Parallel Commentaries on the Bible and Bhagavad Gita, is entitled, "The Law is Perfected in Love." Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. John, chapter 1, we read, "The law was given by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ." Grace means the power to rise spiritually. Truth means the experience of divine realities, not the application in the outer world of that inner experience. Divine love is the soul's experience of oneness with God. Kindness is the human manifestation of that love. Grace is deeper than mere kindness. Wisdom is a divine experience. Justice to all is a human law, though divinely inspired. It follows as consequence of the experience of wisdom. Truth goes deeper than mere justice. While following the law, we should strive always to trace it back to its origins in the vision of God. Therefore, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita urges the devotee not to be satisfied with spiritual precepts alone, but to go beyond them to the direct inner experience of truth. In the 18th chapter of that great scripture, he says, "Nay, but once more take my last word, my utmost meaning have. Precious thou art to me, right well beloved. Listen, I tell thee for thy comfort this. Give me thy heart, adore me, serve me, cling in faith and love and reverence to me. So that shalt thou come to me. I promise true, for thou art sweet to me. And let go those rights and writ duties, fly to me alone. Make me thy single refuge. I will free thy soul from all its sins. Be of good cheer." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om. I really wish I had heard that reading when I was growing up, because instinctively I felt an aversion to rules, any rules, whether it was religious rules or outer rules, government rules that I didn't understand, or I didn't agree with, or I didn't see the point of. And in fact, I remember once saying to one of my parents, they said, "Well, why didn't you follow this law? Why didn't you obey it?" And I said, "Well, I didn't agree with it." And they said, "Well, but I mean, it's the rules, it's the law." And I said, "Well, I don't think it's a good law." They said, "How do you know? What gives you the right to decide what are the good laws and the bad laws?" I said, I didn't have an answer. But I still didn't follow it if I didn't agree with it. And I had a friend who was a Muslim, and her family was Muslim, and they were always pressuring her to do all of the different rituals, and she didn't want to do them. And so I would visit her, and her parents would call. This was in college, and she would speak to them in probably Urdu. I didn't understand it at the time. And she kept saying, actually no, it was Bengali, now I remember. She kept saying, "No, I'm doing it, I'm doing it, I'm doing it." In this case, she was supposed to light a candle for her grandmother's passing, because it was the anniversary of her grandmother's passing, and she was supposed to light a candle and kneel and pray at it for her grandmother's soul. And she didn't. And so finally, her father happened to come into town on business, and she was going to go out to dinner with him, and she was dreading it because she said, he's always pressuring me. They're always pressuring me to do all these religious rites and things, and I don't want to do them. And I said, well, why don't you want to do them? And she said, because I don't understand the point of them. And there are so many people who perform them with devotion and feel deep meaning from them. And I feel that it's disrespectful to those people for me to just go through the motions without feeling anything or understanding the point. And I said, well, but don't you see your parents are getting mad because they think you're disrespecting these ceremonies, but you actually have great respect for them, and that's why you don't want to do them lightly. You should tell your father that. She said, oh no, he will never listen. But she did go to dinner with her father, and she did finally tell him this, and he burst into tears and just said, I am so thrilled. I am so proud of you. The questions you're asking about life, I didn't ask until I was 50. And they had this big healing around the whole thing. But we have to know, because why are these laws in existence? As Jesus said, this Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. We should emblazon that on our foreheads, because all of these outward scriptural rules are there for us to feel God's joy. But over time, if we're not careful, just the nature of the human mind and Maya and delusion as it is, we tend to focus more on the form than on the reason for the form. There was a daughter who was teaching her own young girl how to make a pot roast, and she said, you know, you first shape the pot roast into the right shape, and then you cut the ends off, and then you put it in the pot. And she said, well, why do we cut the ends off? Are they bad? And the mother said, well, I don't actually know why we cut the ends off. Let me ask my mom, because that's how she taught it to me. So she went to visit her mom, and she said, by the way, the pot roast thing, like, why do we cut the ends off again? And she said, you know, I don't know, actually. That's the way my mom taught me. So they went over to Grandma's house, which is, of course, next door in this beautiful story. And they went over to Grandma's house, and they said, Grandma, why did you teach us to cut the ends off? Why did you cut the ends off of the pot roast? And she said, well, the pan I cooked it in was too small. So we always have to ask ourselves, what is the point of this? What is it doing for my consciousness? And even the 10 Commandments, I mean, what in a certain way could sound more heavy than commandment? And even now they still have a bit of an air of, you know, to them. Yogananda translated them to, he said, these should be stated as the 10 rules for eternal happiness. He said the commandments were given for our own sake, to help us achieve that joy that we ourselves want, not as a bunch of rules imposed from above that we better obey or else. We all know what the or else is. When we tell a lie, the guilt follows us and haunts us, or the self-justification. No, it was okay because after all, I mean, you can't always tell the truth. I mean, that would be extreme. But we still feel that knot in our hearts. That's the punishment. And so this was just coming from the Lord through Moses to say, avoid that. Here's a hint on the way to freedom. They're also stated in a bit of heavy language, but the same commandments exist in yoga as well. They're referred to as the yamas and the niyamas. The yamas are the controls, the things that we should avoid, we should control ourselves from not doing. And they're stated all in the negative, like in the case of truthfulness, they say, non-lying. Resist the temptation to lie. Because it's saying lying is not a part of your nature. You're not a sinful being. It's that you would, I mean, why wouldn't we ever tell the truth? Why do we ever lie at all? Usually out of fear. Usually out of, oh, if I say the actual truth, there'll be a problem. I'll have to face this person, or I'll have to face myself. Sometimes we deceive ourselves. And we all do it. This is a cyclical process that we outgrow over time. But resist the temptation to lie. Resist the temptation to harm someone else through our actions, through our words, through our thoughts, even through the evil eye. We had a class yesterday on Raja Yoga, and someone said, yeah, you can sometimes harm somebody by just making a nasty face at them. Why? Usually because of anger. So resist that temptation to express that anger through harm. Express it upward. Say, Divine Mother, I'll give you the evil eye, but I'll spare these people at least, and let's work it out. So, but why do these laws exist? Patanjali states, Patanjali wrote the Yoga Sutras, as Yogananda explained very clearly, the purpose of these 10 rules, interestingly there are 10 in the Yoga Sutras, just like there are in the 10 Commandments, is so that the pail of our consciousness does not have any holes in it through which the milk of peace could leak out. In other words, when we meditate, we may feel so calm, and then we go out into the world and we can feel that peace just evaporate. But it never goes away completely. It's always there. But the more we follow the practices of right attitude, of right action, the more we fight to choose, you know what? I'm going to do the right thing in this case, even though it's hard. The more that peace stays with us and the less it spills out. I was talking to someone recently who said that she had gotten rid of a very difficult client who was always harassing her and always, needy and complaining and, even disrespectful probably. And then a friend of hers called and said, you know what? I have a client just like that one, actually, and I can't work with this person anymore. And I actually would like to refer them to you because I can't deal with it for my peace of mind. And my friend thought about it and thought about the money and thought about the number of clients and how one more would be really good. And she said, no thanks. She said, I just got done dealing with someone like that, and I don't really want to put myself through that. I don't want to disturb my peace of mind. Swami Kriyananda has said recently, make peace of mind your bottom line. Bottom line is usually thought of as money. In this case, she chose peace of mind as her bottom line. And she said, I felt so great about that. Again, the peace didn't go through the holes in the pail. Now, does that mean that therefore any confrontation, any conflict, anything difficult, we should just say, I choose not to engage? Is that what the yogic path teaches? Hardly. And don't worry, because even if we all tried, it would never work. Because Maya will find us. Divine Mother will make sure, because she says, you want to be healed of this weakness. And Sri Yukteswar said something like, our mental faults are like diseased parts recoiling even from a gentle touch, which we would call in psychological terms a button. I've got a button, and someone pressed the button. And so Divine Mother sometimes presses the button over and over and over again, so we just go, until finally we just go, okay, I'm tired, go ahead, press away. And then she stops, and lo and behold, the button is gone. So sometimes, though, we don't have to work each button out, each psychological problem out individually. That would take forever. Because as much as we're healing one thing, then something else is coming up. Then we change jobs or we move to a different place and find a whole new set of circumstances assailing us. So we can't approach things outwardly. We have to approach them from inside. Yogananda said that these rules are important, especially in the beginning. It's important on the spiritual path in the beginning to have discipline, to learn about divine attitudes, to study the behavior of the saints and try to model ourselves after that. And it's not that we stop doing that. But he said, as we draw closer, as we develop spiritually, which we are all doing, then we are automatically in alignment with those rules, even if we're not conscious of them, because it springs from the God consciousness within us. The point of the law is to experience and to express love. The point of all spiritual teaching is to unite our souls back to God. But why then why even this statement then, that Moses, the law was given by Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ? There seems to be a distinction there. And Yogananda explained that at the time that Moses gave those laws, the Jews were needing to be, from all of their separate tribes, molded into one culture. And so they needed an outward set of moral code and different laws to be given, to say, this we will follow. And also, that was a very dark time. It was the Dark Age, according to the Indian reckoning. It was Kali Yuga. And so things were very gross and concrete and physical and material. And God was basically a judge. That's how you kept people in line. It's kind of like when you have a kid who's really acting out. You better do that or else. Sorry. But because sometimes it's the threat. Don't cross that road. Don't run off into Highland. I said to someone recently, be careful going out to your car. And she looked at me just like, do you think I'm 6? And then she came back in like, I see what you mean. It's a scary road. So then Jesus came to say, you, beyond just thinking of God as a judge that imposes laws that you better obey or else, think of him as, in a personal way, as your own father. And you are his child. This was a new teaching. And this is what the avatars do for mankind throughout history. That the understanding of religion starts to become ossified or darkened or muddled or confused, and simultaneously people's yearning becomes stronger. We often say that, well, Krishna says, whenever virtue declines and vice predominates, I incarnate myself on earth in visible form. I punish evil and uplift the good. And so we often think, well, when things get really bad, that's when God sends a divine incarnation to clean up the house. And that's true. But the other side of it is that things get really bad and people are calling out for help. It's that call that draws the divine grace. It's not just simply that God says, well, I've got to look what's happening over on earth. Ooh, how did that happen? I guess it's been, 2 millennia since I was last there. I better go down. It's that people are calling. And in this case, Yogananda said there were many devout Jews that were calling, saying, we want more. And so for that, Jesus came to bring grace and truth. And as Swami writes in the commentary, grace and truth are experiences of the divine. They are not expressions. They are not laws. They are not that, well, because I feel love, I will be nice to people. Kindness is a human expression, but love is divine. And so he came to say, you are this, you should think of God personally, and you can experience this. We see this a lot more in India, and it's partly because it's recognized in India that these different masters come. Although Yogananda still clarified that point, because people would still get in debates. Well, Krishnamurti thought this, and Shankaracharya thought this, and Buddha thought this. But he explained how each one came to lend a special emphasis for the needs of that time. Swami Shankara came at a time when people were worshiping Ganesha and Saraswati and Parvati and Shiva and Vishnu and all these different gods as different entities. They were even fighting over them. As there's one story of, sometimes, if you can believe it, the people who worship Shiva really have a problem with those people who worship Vishnu. And to us, it may just seem silly, like, well, but they're all God, or, in fact, they're both like blue. I mean, already, isn't that strange for us? But it's like, no, it's the same old thing, the human mind. This is mine and that is not mine. And so there is one version of God that is called Ardhana Ishwar, which is half Vishnu and half Shiva, just to make the point. But there was a story of a Vaishnavite, a worshiper of Vishnu, who was worshiping his statue of Vishnu, and suddenly this form of Ardhana Ishwar, half Vishnu, half Shiva, appeared before him. And he was thrilled by it, but as he was continuing the incense, he closed the nostril of the Shiva side so that it wouldn't get the benefit of the incense. And so, actually, when I visited India when I was younger, my uncle said to me, you know, I said, what do Indians think of God as? I was young and I didn't really know anything. And he said, well, God is all of these different forms. There's this Ganesha and Shiva and all this. So there are many gods, but there is also one. And I just thought, there are many and there's one. Like my mind logically, well, either there are many or there is one. How can there be both many and one? And I got one taste of, okay, there is something sophisticated about Indian philosophy and in the Indian approach, because this simple statement is too much for me, and that's how he's starting off. He was saying everyone knows that Shiva, Vishnu, all these are expressions of the one universal consciousness. They're forms that God takes. That understanding came through Shankara, is sometimes known as Adi Shankaracharya, meaning the first Shankara teacher, because now people are named Shankaracharya as sort of part of their title. He came to say, all of these forms that you're fighting over come from the one God. Everything is God. And he went into describing the scriptures, describing spiritual truths, creating interpretations, even not quite laws, but certainly approaching the whole thing through wisdom and deepening people's understanding. And people began to, of course, follow what he was teaching. But near the end of his life, this great saint of wisdom came across, so the story goes, because he wrote a famous song called Bhaja Govindam, which means seek God. And he wrote everything in Sanskrit, which is a very complicated grammar. So on top of that, to compose a poem in Sanskrit is even more complicated. And everyone bowed at his vast intellect and wisdom that he could just move this language around. In fact, someone who wrote about Sanskrit named Panini way back when. It's unfortunate because Panini now means sandwich, but back then Panini was this man's name who wrote a scripture, and he said, "Who knows my grammar knows God," because of the divineness of the Sanskrit language. But as I was saying, Shankaracharya came to a man who was conjugating verbs and doing grammar rules out loud to really memorize them. And Shankaracharya, who again was a great master of Sanskrit and a great wise man who was coming to clarify everyone's understanding, he just said he said, "Seek God, seek God. For when that appointed time comes," meaning of your death, "grammar rules surely will not save you." So this great saint of wisdom said, seek God, seek love, love God. Don't get caught up in all these rules and all these forms. Don't miss the point. There is even a Sanskrit word which I would like to learn, which Patanjali writes in the Yoga Sutras, which is one of the spiritual obstacles is missing the point. And so, what is the point? The point is to love, and I'd like to give you two examples that come to mind from the life of Swami Kriyananda. There was a time in 1976 when the community was burned down by a forest fire, and of the 21 out of the 22 homes in the village were burned, and then that last home, a tree fell on it in the winter, as if Divine Mother said, "I meant every house." And the neighbors, some of the neighbors also lost their homes as well. It wasn't just Ananda Village property itself. And it was discovered that the cause of the fire was a faulty spark arrestor on a county vehicle that had been driving on Ananda property at that time. So the neighbors said, "We can sue and get all our money back." And Ananda at that time didn't have any insurance, any stores of any kind, meaning storage of any kind. And the neighbors sued and collected. And Swami Kriyananda wrote to the county and said, "I know that you're worried about what we're going to do since we were the biggest losers in this fire." He said, "I want you to know we will not be suing." He said, "We don't wish to take our bad luck out on our neighbors." Now you can say, well, that was just noble, and it was, but it came from a place of love. He said, I accept that this is our karma. I accept that we're doing a good thing for God. People even said, well, isn't this proof that God is displeased with you if she burnt it all down? I said, it just means we need to expand. Actually, the village at that time was going through a rather difficult time, and 50 people left after that fire who just said, forget this. I'm not in tune with this, and this is proof that it's wrong. And Swami started touring the country, the U.S., saying we've got to go out, give concerts, raise money, rebuild. And the first money that came in went to those people who had left. They had an agreement that if you build a house on the land and then you leave, the village will buy your house from you. And even in this case, the houses were burned down. And still, they paid everyone back what they were due, because he wanted it to be clean. And he also thought logically, suppose we sue the county, and the county has to pay us back $1 million, which it doesn't have lying around in its budget for in case of lawsuits. So it will have to raise taxes on everybody to be able to pay for this. So everybody will end up having to pay us back indirectly. So why do that? Why go through that? And another example I wanted to give was, there was a man who had built a house at Ananda village and slowly decided the village was not where he wanted to be. And so he said, I'm leaving and, goodbye. But I want you to pay me for my house, and I want you to pay, let's say it's, I don't know, $100,000. And the accountant said to Swami, well, this is ridiculous. I mean, his house is, clearly worth $30,000. We had someone, 2 people even evaluate it. It's got all these problems and whatever. And so they went back to the man and said, look, it's only worth 1/3 what you're asking. And the man said, well, that's what it cost me to make it. And it also took me a long time, and my time is in that house too, my labor. And the accountant said, well, it's not really our fault that you didn't build it well and that it took you a long time, because you're not a good builder. The house is worth this much. And so Swami said to this man, the accountant, he said, just pay him the full amount. He said, what? And he said, it's okay, and the man said, but it's not. He said, just do it. Okay. So he paid the man the full amount. And we can ask ourselves why. Was he afraid of conflict? Hardly. Did he just want to be nice to this man? Did he feel sorry for him? Since you're leaving Ananda, since you're leaving the spiritual path, perhaps let's just send you off with as much money as can carry you? No. He did it from a place of love. And about 20 years later, that same man came back to Ananda and is still part of Ananda today. And perhaps Swami knew that if we had this issue over this piece of money, that would be the last straw that would close his heart. But because it didn't happen, maybe it brought him back. We don't know. But we have to remember that always in our dealings with people. Sometimes we have the rules, and the rules are meant to be bent or broken in the case of love. That's why Yogananda said, pray to Divine Mother. The mother is closer than the father. Because the father will send you up to your room for breaking a rule and say, no dinner, and the mother will slide pancakes under the door anyway. So speaking of these incarnations coming to correct our understanding, these divine incarnations, Moses came and then Jesus came to say it can be more personal. We have to ask, okay, well, what is the need of our times? And Yogananda came to us now in response to the call of many sincere Christians, Indians too, but especially Christians, at least from our point of view here in the West, who were saying, I want a direct experience of God. I don't want just a personal relationship. I don't just want to pray. I want to become a saint. I want to perceive God. I want to feel that love in my heart. Babaji said, I perceive many potential saints waiting to be awakened in the West. And so for that purpose he came, and so he could explain and state directly through Autobiography of a Yogi to the mass media, the mass population rather. It sold over 5 million copies. to read that book and say, you can perceive God, and Kriya Yoga is a way to like accelerate your spiritual advance, revolution, and I want this. And he could come out and state it directly because people were ready to hear it. It's not that Jesus didn't know these things, or that Yogananda came to correct Jesus or Moses. The masters never come to correct the misunderstanding of another master. Yogananda said they're all one, and there's no disharmony, but they have to lend special emphasis to something so that we'll get it, which naturally means they de-emphasize other things. So in our case, in addition to this clear understanding that Yogananda brought, he also brought techniques which suit the modern mind very well. What can I do to perceive God? What can I do to improve my consciousness? What can I do to feel more love? And so in this time, we're very fortunate that these techniques have come and that we can use them to find God. Thank you, Keshava. I wanted to also include this reading from Whispers from Eternity. It's titled, I am thy bird of paradise, wishing to fly in thy astral airplane. I just love Yogananda. Thy astral airplane of parting came to take my soul away from this earth. I wondered through what strange skies I would soar now, and to what lands I would travel. I asked the mystic pilot, cosmic law, whither I was to go. That silent one answered soundlessly, I am the pilot of life, mistakenly called the terrible death by ignorant earth folk. I am thy brother, uplifter, redeemer, friend, unloader of every gross burden of bodily troubles. I have come to fetch thee away from thy valley of broken dreams to the highlands of light, where poisonous vapors of sorrow never rise. I have broken mercifully thy cage of flesh attachment, that thy soul bird may escape. I have broken thy chains of disease and fear. Thy long encasement behind bars of bones accustomed thee to thy little cage, making thee cling to it fearfully, even when I opened its door. Yet in thy heart thou didst want thy freedom always. Why now art thou fear-filled, having won thy long-craved freedom? O bird of paradise, hop into my plane of omnipresence. Fold now thy fluttering wings, and ride with me, peacefully, anywhere, everywhere, in thine eternal home.